Welcome. My name is Matt Raible. How are you today? I like to start with a little bit of scotch. Feel it helps me speak a little easier. A little water, probably too much. My name is Matt Raible, and I am an old-fashioned Java developer. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana. No electricity, no running water. And I had to walk 2 miles to the bus stop every day. And yes, it was uphill both ways. I have 2 children, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, so I do have a teenager now. I also have a middle child, known as a 6621 window bus. It's been 11 years since I bought it. You can see a picture there in yellow. I used to say it'll be done in a few more months. Now it'll be a few more days. So I thought it'd be done by this conference, but unfortunately not. To help fill the gap, my wife and I bought a 4x4 bus, that blue one in the background, also known as a synchro. And I bought it because I wanted a bus that runs, so that's pretty nice. But enough about me. What about you? How many Java developers do we have here today? That's about 95% of the room. How many people have been doing web development for 20 years? 20 years, yep, we got 6 of you. 7. How many have been doing it for 10 years? Okay, so that's a good portion, probably a third of the room. How many just started in the last year? Nobody. Okay, well, got some experience in the room. How many people use JSF? We got about 25. Keep your hands up if you like it. Hey, there's some hands that stayed up. What about GWT? Anyone using GWT? We got about 10 or 15. Okay. How many people like JavaScript? This is way more than most conferences get, so congratulations there. That's about, I'd say, 20% of the room. So if you've been doing web development since the 1990s, are you still hip, is the question. And if you're someone like me, an old stodgy, old-fashioned Java developer, then probably not. But do you want to be a hip Java developer? And if you do, one of the easiest ways to do that is to use Java 8. There's parallel collections, there's JSR support with the date and time API, there's functional interfaces, there's lambdas, right? There's a lot of neat things there that make programming in Java a lot easier. There's even Nashorn, the JavaScript engine, if you want to write JavaScript on the JVM, that's supported. So let's define what a hipster is. A hipster is one who is exceptionally aware or interested in the latest trends and tastes. So in Java land, there's some latest trends. There's annotations, right? We used to have XML hell. Now we have annotation hell. But they're better than XML, and they get you a little closer to, the code that you're writing. There's environments for dev, test, and production, and this is even, part of the Java EE spec now. But a lot of people use this to build their applications and have different environments and different profiles. There's microservices. There's containerless deployment and monitoring. All those are, pretty new things and pretty hip things in Java land. Spring has one of the best track records for hipness in Java land. They've got this Spring Boot product now that's been around for a couple years. I started using it in, I guess, late 2013. Josh Long actually demoed it to me at Devoxx. He was very excited about it, so that was nice. It embeds Tomcat and Jetty or Undertow directly, so you don't deploy it to a container. You can, but you certainly don't have to. And it provides opinionated starter palms to simplify your Maven configuration. And if you're using Gradle, that's supported as well. And it automatically configures Spring whenever possible. Provides production-ready features, metrics, health checks, externalized configuration. In fact, I used it on a project in late 2013 mostly because of the externalized configuration, which allowed you to basically deploy to different environments and configure, the different endpoints or the different database configuration outside of the actual jar or WAR file. So that's pretty cool. No code generation, no requirement for XML, and Gradle 3 is even based on Spring Boot. So they have this thing called Spring Initializer that allows you to get started with Spring Boot really easy. You can use curl, you can use your browser, you can use IntelliJ IDEA. How many people have not heard of Spring Boot? Nobody. Okay, how many people have? That's just to see who's sleeping, so, okay. Well, I'm going to do a real quick demo. I'll try to do it in under a minute or two here. I got to adjust my monitors first. We got some things out of whack. Then we got to mirror everything. Okay. Do you guys see everything okay? Thumbs up? All right. I got this weird headset here. Okay. So fire up IntelliJ. How many people like Eclipse? It's 10. How about NetBeans? Geerton's in here? No, there's 3. That's good. So Spring Initializer doesn't require you to log into the Apple Store, luckily. But IntelliJ comes with this nice little Spring Initializer feature. So we'll just create, we don't need anything too crazy. We'll take the web and we'll take the JPA and we'll go with the latest version. That's pretty slick. And we'll just call this demo. And it basically allows you, there's an application class that gets created, not application properties, this demo application. And within here, there's not a whole lot of code, but if you add a Pojo, so this is just a simple blog, and you add a repository, that's all you need with JPA to do a repository with Spring JPA. And then we add a command line runner that just basically prints out the repositories that are in there. You can go in here, create a new data.sql file. Inserts a couple values in there. Go into our pom.xml. We add h2 and then back to our demo application. And we can even create a controller. And that's all you need to develop a REST API basically with Spring Boot. So, we get 80 lines of code there. And we can start it up and curl localhost. Oh, we got to do blogs. There it is. So, one of the fastest REST APIs you can create in the business. So that's pretty cool. Got to change my mirroring preferences here back to not mirrored. So quiet. So, just by doing that, I feel pretty hip. Starting to feel a little hipper than what I got here, so I'm going to put on my Converse. I'm not going to tie them because that takes a little longer. But you might notice I'm wearing skinny jeans for you all. So the latest trends in web development, we got Java MVC frameworks, CSS3 with animations, mobile first development, front-end optimization, which I've been on so many projects where this is something that people just don't do in the beginning, where you can do expires headers or gzipping, or you can do compression of your, or concatenation of your JavaScript files and all that. And it's just so easy to do, and you can get so much faster UIs out of it. I encourage you, especially gzipping and expires headers. And REST APIs, you know, those are something that are almost ubiquitous now. And we're progressing towards reactive APIs. You know, REST isn't the greatest thing, but it's pretty darn good. So AngularJS is one of the hottest, if not the hottest, JavaScript MVC framework out there. If you look at Google Trends, you can compare it to Ember.js, React.js, Knockout, Backbone, and it's just way off the charts compared to those JavaScript frameworks. If you look at regular Java frameworks, Spring MVC, Java Server Faces, Gwt, it's even catapulted way beyond those and doing a lot better than those. They're just, you know, more popular. It's more headlines. And if you look at the most starred projects on GitHub, we have Bootstrap as #1, and we have Angular as #3. Free programming books, by the way, #2. Was not aware of that, but you can go out there and, you know, download those apparently. This is from, you know, just yesterday, so very, you know, new information. So wouldn't it be hip if someone took all these cool projects, Spring Boot and Angular, and married them together, and, you know, had Bootstrap in there, and it was all, you know, working nicely together? Well, Julien Dubois and his hip team did it. JHipster. So JHipster is a technology stack that basically produces an application that uses those 3 frameworks. So it comes with responsive web design by default. HTML5 boilerplate is in there. Twitter Bootstrap is in there. It's now just called Bootstrap. AngularJS internationalization with Angular Translate. It's got SAS support if you want it. You don't have to use it. It's got WebSocket support if you want it with Spring WebSocket. Uses Yeoman to generate the project, which gives you, you know, easy installation of JavaScript files. And if you don't need, you know, a single page application with something like Angular, you can use Timeleaf for its template engine to generate web pages. So anything you can do in Spring Boot, you could do with JHipster, because they aren't really doing anything on top of you know, as an augmentation of Spring Boot. They're just building on it. So it's a complete, you know, Spring application with all that stuff in there, and it's ready to go into production. It's got, you know, the metrics built in. It's got EHCache or Hazelcast. You get a choice between those. It's got the HTTP session clustering if you want it with Hazelcast. It's got optimized static resources. It's just got all this, you know, good stuff in there. And so if we look at the project, as of October 2015, 275 page views just on its website in October. So it's got a lot of people looking at it, 10,000 downloads, 2,961 stars. If we get, you know, 5 more from this, then I'll be happy. And 159 contributors, so it's very much one of those open source projects that's not really owned by anyone. It's very much made from a community of people, you know, trying to make it easier for other developers to basically, you know, use this kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And I'm tired of this tie, so I got a better one. I feel like I'm wearing this headset, so at some point I could just take it off. Remind me if I do. There we are. That's better. So you can compare it to JBoss Forge if you want. Their number of stars, they only have 158. So JHipster's doing pretty well. Twice the number of stars as Wildfly, in fact. The downloads, 130,000 since it started. Just since they started, you know, downloading or recording download statistics this year. I already mentioned all the different foundational frameworks. Project options, Java 7 or Maven, Gradle. How many people use Maven? That's like 60% of the room. How many people use Make? Really? Not one. Okay. Gradle? Gradle fans? The other 40%? Okay. And then you can choose from authentication type. So it's pretty cool that you can use cookie-based authentication, traditional, you know, session-based authentication. You can also use token-based authentication, or you can use OAuth 2, SQL or NoSQL, using MongoDB or Cassandra or any of the SQL databases, caching, EHCache or Hazelcast, Grunt or Gulp. Like I said, it's got authentication and security built in, Spring Boot metrics dashboard. It's got all that integrated. So let's look at just a demo of a couple applications I've written. So the first one we're going to look at, just to kind of show off its features, is 21 points. So if you log into this one, log in as admin. Someone change the admin password. No. It's either that or the no. Well, we'll look at a different one, right? Good thing I have two. No, I'm connected. So we're in. So this is just, some of the features that come out of the box. Here's what user management looks like. It's got a user tracker. This doesn't really show up when you're using a stateless mechanism. If you're using session-based, you would see it. Metrics, so it shows, all these metrics that are provided by Spring Boot but don't really come with a UI. And it shows how much, heap is being used or HTTP requests, all the statistics for all the different services, and even your EHCAS statistics. It's got health checks, shows that my email is down, but database Elasticsearch and everything's up. Configuration, you can actually tweak this on the fly and audit, so you see who logged in and if they're successful or not. And even logging. This is a very handy feature in the sense that you can control your logging. You can switch from info to debug on a particular org.spring framework, and it'll actually update in real time. That's a feature of Logback, but they provide UI here for it. So that's basically it. And then there's account and password. All those are standard things, as well as switching to a different language. Ships with English and French out of the box. So those are kind of neat. And Yeoman's basically a workflow that compromises or builds on 3 different types of tools. The scaffolding tool called Yo, gotta like that name. Yo, build me something. The build tool, Grunt, Gulp, and a package manager like Bower and NPM. So it's easy installation of new JavaScript libraries with Bower. It's build and optimization with Grunt or Gulp, and it's testing with Karma and Phantom.js. So it doesn't really invent anything new there. It's just leveraging stuff that's in the JavaScript ecosystem already. How many people have heard of BrowserSync? Okay, we got about 5 or 6. I don't think I'm plugged into any audio, but I have this video here. We'll see how it sounds.
BrowserSync will automatically reload all browsers whenever your files.
This is when you take off your headset, right?
So, for example, if we had a class here and hit save, all browsers are reloaded. This works for CSS too.
It's going to be really
In this
loud.
example, we are compiling Sass into CSS, and then BrowserSync. We also synchronize scroll position as well as clicks and form inputs. We have a user interface that allows you to toggle sync options on or off. As well as track history and push URLs to devices. And we also offer remote debugging using the popular Winery project, as well as some simpler CSS helpers and a latency throttler, so that you can test your website on a slower connection. BrowserSync is a free project, it's open source, it's installed on the command line via NPM, and we encourage you to check it out.
So if you're not using it, I definitely use it. It basically saves you from hitting F5 or Shift Reload, and it just does it for you all day long. And so all you have to do, especially if you're using something like the latest Mac with El Capitan and you have the split screen going, you can be developing in one screen, and as soon as you hit save, the other screen reloads. It's pretty awesome. Saves you, at least a few minutes a day. So now I want to show you what JHipster does and create a small application with it, and using JHipster. So my goals with this demo is it's 6:10 right now. I hope to be able to do all this in 30 minutes. So generate a basic blog application, CRUD entities, and then add some security features and deploy to Heroku. I've never pulled off the deploy to Heroku in a presentation, so we'll see if we get there today. So we're going to start with this simple demo application. It's got a name and email and a blog, which is a name and a handle, and then an entry which has title, content, and date, and then we can have tags on those. So one-to-many, many-to-many relationships, and all that. So we'll get set up here. Close this one. Get our mirroring back. So we don't need IntelliJ right away. Close everything down. Okay, how's that font? Can you read it in the back, or you want it bigger? It's okay, all right. So we'll start with JHipster. What was the base name of your application? So this is a new feature that just got added. How many people have used Yeoman before in a project? Raise your hands. So probably 10 or 20, about a third of the room. One of the things it does that I'm not used to as a Java developer is it creates the project in your current directory. And it creates them with a bunch of dot files for like configuring IntelliJ or configuring JSLint and things like that. So right now you'll notice that I'm about to create it in my home directory. And it's about to put all kinds of files like in my home directory that I don't want. So just in the last week, someone added the feature that it basically defaults to the name of your current directory. So because of that, I know that, hey, it's Raible, and I don't want to be in there. So it's a great feature they just added. If you make a directory and then cd into it, that's the best way to do it. And then it defaults to that directory name. So we're going to do org JHipster. We'll go ahead and just choose some defaults here. SQL. I like Postgres in production. I'll use H2 in development. You can use EHCache or Hazelcast. I'll just go with EHCache. Search engine. Yep. Elasticsearch. Clustered HTTP. Nope. Spring WebSockets. Nope. I'll go with Maven. Grunt or Gulp. I'll just go with Grunt because it's recommended. I don't need SAS right now. Translation support. Yes. And Gatling or Cucumber. I'll go with Gatling. And so now, if you thought Maven downloaded the internet, holy cow, NPM, like that thing downloads the internet and all its friends too. Like if I did a line of code count on the node modules directory after it runs everything, that thing is huge. There's over 1 million lines of code in this project that I just created after everything runs. And at least Maven like puts it somewhere you don't remember about, right? It's in your M2 repository directory. If anyone doesn't know, there's a new Maven Central mirrored at Google. So this is mavencentral.storage.googleapis.com. I did some tests. I wrote a blog post about it earlier this week. It's about 25% faster than Maven Central. So if you use it and you're downloading a lot of jars, you might get a couple minutes back in your day. So if we go ahead and open this project, how many people like IntelliJ's new licensing scheme? Nobody. It's only 89 bucks to upgrade. It's not too bad. So we got a lot of stuff, downloading. NPM still going here. Luckily, I ran this beforehand, so some of the jars are already downloaded. But if we look at the project, it's got a bunch of neat features here. You'll see, I didn't even know that you could have an editor config, but it'll configure indent style spaces versus tabs. It'll configure for certain files to indent by 2 instead of 4 for JSON files. So there's kind of some neat configurations in there, and it basically overrides or configures it right out of the box for IntelliJ. It recognizes that. There's some other ones in here. BowerRC tells you where the Bower files are. This is what you'll send to people when you have issues with JHipster, this yo-rc.json. It basically has all those choices you selected when you created the project. So if you wanted to create similar projects, you could just have this in the directory and run that yo JHipster, and it creates all that for you. And if we look at all the things that come with this project, it's got a standard Spring Boot application.java with different profiles configured. It's got some logging. It's got some async in there. It's got configuration for Elasticsearch, database, cloud database. So it ships with all these things for you out of the box. Security for Ajax-based security, even a mail service, and APIs for account and auditing and logging and all that. So that's pretty great. And even we recently added Maven wrapper, so you don't have to have Maven installed if you don't want to. You could just use that. And then here's the POM with all the different dependencies. So a lot bigger than your standard Spring Boot POM. But the greatest thing is there's no real JHipster code in here, right? You own this all this code. It's not downloading any JHipster dependencies. So you could send this to your boss and be like, I wrote 10,000 lines of code today. Check it. Only took like 5 minutes. NPM was the thing that took the longest. So if you look here, 3 minutes, 43 seconds for it to do the NPM stuff. And I don't know, this is a funny demo because it just sits there and counts, right, how many files. And it's mostly that node modules directory, so I'll leave that going. We don't want that one. That's in case I really mess up. So we can create some entities here. So what do we want to name the field? What we want to add a field? Name it name, string, validation rules, yep. Minimum length, 10. Next one, yep. We said that handle, string, validation, yep. And no more. Relationships, yeah, user has one. Name of the relationship, yep, that's fine. We're going to allow many to one. We're going to use the login field. Then we're going to have another one. We're going to call this entry. We haven't created it yet. And we're going to allow one to many. And then that's it. And you can generate a DTO if you want. If you'd like to have wrappers around your objects, it supports that. I'm not going to do it. And then we're not going to have that many blogs, so I'm not going to create the pagination. So those are the files it creates. There's not that many Java files because we've been doing Java long enough that people like the Spring folks have figured out how to make it, so we just write a couple lines of code for our repositories. And the biggest class in here is probably that resource class for developing the API, but everything else is pretty small. And then there's a whole bunch of JavaScript and HTML generated for you that follows a lot of the Angular best practices. And you'll even notice at the bottom there's some JSON files, which are the translation mechanisms, or the translation files. So then how it works, and I only know this because I messed it up a few times, is if you're creating something like a blog and it has entries and then you have tags, if you wanted to create the entries that have tags, for some reason it's in the documentation and I wrote it down somewhere, I just can't articulate it that well, it doesn't work basically. So you have to create the tag class first. It's basically the non-owning entity. You create the owning entity last, and since entry owns tags, then we create that last. So that's with many-to-many relationships. So with the tag, we're going to add a field. We're going to call it name, string, yep, required. That's it. And then it has a relationship to entry, and it's many-to-many. Is it the owner? No. And I'm not using DTOs. Sure, we'll put an infinite scroll on that. And then we'll do the entry. This has a title, string, validate, yep. Required. We have content. And then we have the last one, which is date. We'll do that as a zoned date time, part of the Java 8 API. We'll make that required. And then we have a relationship with the blog. And we have a many to one. And then we want to use the name when we show that. And then we have a relationship to the tags. Many to many. And then we do on that. We want to use name. Okay, so that created a bunch of files for us. So if we go back here, we can look at our domain, and we can see blog was created, entry was created, tag was created. And as well, using Liquibase, it created a number of files for creating those tables. So here's the blog table, tag table, entry table. And since it's a standard Spring Boot app, we can look for that application class, and we can just run it. Oh, it's still building something back here. The old updating indices. Oh, it's done. That's nice. So we'll start it up, take a look at it, and make sure it has, what we want. So there we are. It comes with 2 users out of the box. It tells you that right there. You got an admin and a user. So if we log in as admin, see that? We can go to the entities. We can create a new blog. Call it admin's blog. Admin. And we'll assign it to that admin. And then we'll create a user's blog. Assign it to the user. And create a couple entries. The beer is great. The name comes with a calendar picker. Actually, this is part of HTML5. So if you specified input type equals date, it does that for you. We'll say 6 p.m. and we'll assign it to that user's blog. Oh, we need some tags. Let's go create some tags. We'll go Devoxx, JHipster, beer, travel, fun. And then we'll go and create another entry. We flew Icelandic Air. We love them. They give you nice pillows and blankets. And they go through Reykjavik. So we'll make this one. This was on Monday. We left Denver around 4:30 p.m. And we'll put this on the user's blog as well. And then we'll add one for the administrator. He's all mad. Sys admins rule. We'll make that a bit ahead of time. He's probably up early at 4 in the morning writing his blog. And he's just doing it for fun. So the problem that we have here is now you look at this, we log in as a user. We go to the blogs and you can see the admin's blog and you can edit it. So that's not good. We need to lock that down a bit. So how we're going to do that is we go into this blog resource that's been built for us, and we look at this blogs and we say, well, not just find all, but find by user as current user. And so this is actually part of that blog repository. They built this in there for us. This is part of JHipster. They just said, hey, you might need this method, so find by user as current user is already there, and that gives us the ability to say, okay, well, let's compile blog resource, and then we refresh. Are we looking at entries? Yeah, we're looking at entries. So we're back to blog, and now you see they only see their blog, right? And if they create a new entry, same thing. In this drop down, there's only theirs. So now we need to do the same thing for entry resource. Find by blog user, login, order by date descending. I mean, easy method to remember. They have this security utils where you can get the current user's login. And then this is Spring Data. It's sweet because you can just create methods like that and they actually perform SQL queries behind the scenes. So you can see that's finding the blog relationship user, the login field, and then order by date descending. So if we compile this one, save it, compile it, go back to this one, compile it. Now, to be fair, if we were using Eclipse, I wouldn't have to compile them, right? It would compile it for me, so that's pretty nice. And then if we refresh here, now those things are filtered out. All right, now we can make this entries a little better. If we look at this, we say, well, you know, I like to use HTML when I write blog posts. So the beer is strong. Great. I like that it's strong great, because it is strong and great. But you'll notice it doesn't escape that, so we have to go in here and we have to say, you know, where's that entries page, and where's that content at, and let's wrap that with a span, ngbind HTML. And now that should work, right? No. So you get to look at your console and it says, you know, you're using an unsafe value in a safe context. You say, okay, well, I know Angular well enough, and I need to go here in the app.js and say ng sanitize. And so Angular by default doesn't allow you to do, you know, cross-site scripting sort of stuff in there. It uses a way of parsing that HTML and only allowing safe HTML through. So you see there's nothing in that content right there, but if we refresh, then there is. And if we were using BrowserSync, then we wouldn't even have to refresh. So now I'm firing up BrowserSync, you know, back to that page. Cool thing is, if we went and said, okay, well, you think you're so smart, how about putting a script tag in there? And the nice thing is that Angular's smart enough not to actually show that and parse it. So that's a nice feature of Angular. If we were to go back into our entries and make that look a little better, we could take this table out, put in something a little more readable. I'll take the whole thing, that's fine. So this is just, you know, formatting the HTML, changing it up a bit, but now it looks more like a blog post. And then you can edit it, and that all still works. You could put, you know, tags around here. You could even change it so, you know, that is a different type of field. So entry dialog is where those dialogues are. And we could say, well, I want a text area, right, instead of that input field. And then I'll give it rows equals 10. And look at there, it did all it for me, right? It refreshed and everything. So that's Bower, that's not, or that's BrowserSync, not so much JHipster, but it's a pretty cool tool. And that's one of the things I encourage people to do is there's not that many folks that are actually starting new projects, right? Greenfield projects that JHipster might make sense for. But there's so much knowledge in the project that you can learn how to do something with Angular or with Spring Boot just by looking at the source code from a generated project. So that's pretty nice. And so we're looking at 6:29. And I said at 6:10 I could do it in 20 minutes, right? No, I said 30, so I think I'm okay. JHipster, Heroku. Man, I feel hip. So we're going to call this, you have to have a unique name or this will fail most of the time. So I'm going to do JHipster Devoxx. We'll do it in the EU. They're kind of dirty. Some more scotch here if anyone wants some. So this basically creates a couple classes for you. There's a Heroku database class it creates. It also runs all that NPM and Grunt stuff from Maven. So I got my hipster tattoos. See those? They rub off, or are they still there? They're still there? I'll be wearing this all night. And so one of the things I learned is I wrote a couple of blog posts recently about setting this up in Jenkins. And when you run just the regular Spring Boot run process, it does a lot of what NPM does for you. So it does the install, it downloads all that Bower stuff. It even runs like the unit tests. So if you're setting this up in Jenkins, you don't need to do a whole lot from the NPM or Grunt perspective. You can just run the build like you would from Maven or Gradle. And it has plugins that run that NPM and Grunt stuff for you. So it looks like it uploaded pretty fast. By the way, we're staying at a bed and breakfast down near central Antwerp, and it has got the fastest Wi-Fi and just internet connection that I've seen. At home, we have 60 megs down and up. Here, it's like 100, so well done on the internet. So look, there it goes. It says it's up. Heroku logs, tail. See if it's really up. So it's starting. Starts with 5 connections as the max pool size by default. You can change that to 20 with Postgres. By default, the MySQL version on Heroku only allows 10, so that's why we're a bit conservative and only have 5 there. It also does Liquibase as a async task, both in development and in Heroku. So that means it starts populating and building your database, but it finishes, and is non-blocking and lets everything keep going. So that's kind of nice. You'll notice it failed to load Elasticsearch there. Here's a trick I learned. Is we have this application. So if you look at Elasticsearch on Heroku, you're like, what? $10 a month? Like, I like this stuff for free. You can actually use Elasticsearch with the same configuration that it has in development, which is just putting it on the local file system. And so in prod, instead of trying to connect to a cluster, you can just do that. And so if I redeployed, which I will do towards the end of this talk, Elasticsearch will work just fine. And so I have seen these on a couple of my applications. This memory, 103%, it's exceeding. Those are just warnings. It really doesn't seem to affect the performance of the application. I have a couple applications that run it using a gig of memory, and I still get those same warnings. So it doesn't really seem to affect it whether I use 512 or a gig. So if we could close out of that, Heroku open, there we are. We're deployed in the cloud. We can log in. Someone can go in there and change the password and hack away. You can sign up. There's sessions. So if you guys all logged in, I could start canceling sessions for you. But so it also ships with Gatling, as I showed you, and Cucumber. Those are 2 options. There is a bunch of performance tests in here that you could run against, that blogs API. And what I found is it handles pretty good, even on, a local machine. It's about 4,000 requests per second, just testing it locally until it falls down. So, if you want to scale up, obviously, you just add more machines. If you want to be stateless, then you'll do even better. Has anyone used Gatling? A couple people. So if you want to do performance testing and you're looking for something that maybe uses your existing data, it's a great tool. There's a way to actually grab and talk to a database and populate the tests with data from that database. It's also really nice in that it can record your tests. So what I do is I create a bunch of unit tests or integration tests that talk to the database or talk to the API, and then I just record them, and then boom, there's your scenario, and you can play it back. So UI testing, there is a couple unit tests that ship for the JavaScript classes that are in there. It doesn't generate JavaScript unit tests for you. It does generate unit tests for your Java code, but not for your controllers. I wrote a blog post recently about using Protractor to basically drive the UI with WebDriver.js, and that works pretty well. And so I hope to contribute that back to the project so you could run tests against your UI to verify everything works. So it's pretty sweet, right? AngularJS, Java 8, microservices. What more could you want? There is more. There's themes. And this is where Bootstrap really comes in and does a really nice job. Is most people download Bootstrap and they use it, and it looks like every Bootstrap site out there. It's like the new Maven site of our world, right? They all look the same. But the beauty is there's a huge theme ecosystem out there that you can leverage, and as long as you're writing your HTML with the certain classes that Bootstrap advocates, then boom, you have a new theme and it works pretty well. So for example, we could go back here and we could say, what's the name of it? Bootstrap Angular Material Design. There's a theme for that. So it's not that one, it's this one here. So we can say, let's try that. And it's put it in there, and then this guy's still running? Nope, we stopped it. Now it's using a new theme, right? And all we did was install a new Bootstrap theme. So pretty slick. The way it does that is there's a wire dep task that you'll see that runs right here. And actually in the index.html, it knows what Bower dependencies you have. If there's CSS, it puts them at the top. If they're JavaScript dependencies, it puts them at the bottom. So you don't have to mess with like figuring out, okay, I just added this to Bower, now how do I get it in here? So again, this isn't JHipster specific, but it's a pretty cool feature that you could add to your own projects, especially if you're doing Angular stuff. And so this theme, this Angular without the A at the end, is the name of this theme. Yeah. We use it on a project for a client, and it's $20 if you use it as an individual. So I bought it for that JHipster book site. You might have saw me using it there. My client bought it, and they actually have a product that they're selling to the general public. Cost them $1,000. I think it's up to $1,100. So still not that expensive. And Bootstrap 4 is actually shipping with supported themes that are $99. So you can actually buy a theme. It's supported by the project, and I believe it's a one-time fee, and you get a pretty slick-looking website, not just the default. So Angular 2's coming out with a whole set of wonky new syntax. It's got brackets and parentheses, eliminates controllers, directives, scope, Angular module goes away, and JQLite goes away. So there's this great tutorial. I just want to throw it in here. If you want to go learn about a lot of the TypeScript type of syntax that they're using with Angular 2, this is a great 2-minute video on it. You can get them from my slides later. So I wrote a book on JHipster. I liked it so much. What I found was in early 2012, I started using Bootstrap. In late 2013, I started using Spring Boot, and late 2013 as well was Angular. So I've been using these a couple years, and then I saw JHipster come along, and I was like, wow, you're doing all the hard work for me. I want to write a book about it, because a lot of their site basically says, hey, if you want to learn about Angular, go learn Angular over here. If you want to learn about Bootstrap, go to Bootstrap site. So I wanted to add a little more in that. So I wrote it. It's 130 pages. It's developing that real-world 21 points app, and it's free. You can download it from InfoQ as a PDF, as a MOBI, or as a EPUB document. And one of the cool things I learned was when I created the project, that 21 points project, it had 8,500 lines just generated for me. After I generated the entities, it generated like 4,000 more lines of code. But then to tweak it and do what I actually wanted to do with it, it only required, you know, another 1,000 lines of code. So the real meat of me writing what I wanted to write didn't take a whole lot of code. And by language, you know, Java's still most of the code. There's a bunch of JavaScript in there too, and there's HTML, so, you know, pretty nice. If you want to learn more about JHipster, please come talk to me. There's also all these wonderful sites here. This YouTube video here is by the project founder. He actually did something similar to what I did, but he did it with bank accounts. And so if you want, you know, a demo like that, you can go and look at that. And like I said, the mini-book was released just a couple weeks ago. We actually plan on keeping it up to date with JHipster and with Angular. Angular 2 support for JHipster is actually coming when Angular 2 is released. And what Google has said about Angular 1 versus 2 is that they will basically publish Angular 2 as the main project when there's more traffic to that website. So there's AngularJS.org and there's Angular.io. Angular.io is the number 2. There is an upgrade path, so you can use them in the same application. And there's also a pretty exciting thing that's happening with JHipster. We recently started looking at John Papa's style guide, which is basically a style guide that says, write your JavaScript this way and use your Angular this way, and you'll be ready for Angular 2. And so we might be incorporating that in small chunks over the next couple weeks. So you can stay hip by following me on my blog. Hit me up on Twitter. I'll upload this presentation later, and I'll post my code to GitHub. So that 21 points application was something that I wrote. And one of the things I did was I wasn't quite ready to publish it and, you know, let people look at the source of the project. And I thought I could get away with that for a little while. But the book is out there, and people are asking for the source. So I thought that at Devoxx here, I would open source it. So I have this tweet here that I saved. Let's see if I can tweet it. So as part of my talk, I wanted to open source 21 points on GitHub. So there I did it. Not that hard. So if you have any questions, I'm a hip guy, so I like to drink hip beer. This Rochefort 8 is supposed to be pretty good. Any questions? Do I get more beers? I got one more. It's a Delirium Tremens. That was recommended as well. There's plenty of scotch. Ooh. Funny story, on the way over here, I had to get all dressed up for this talk. And my wife and I were probably halfway. We weren't halfway, maybe a half a kilometer. And I realized, you know what I forgot? My laptop. So, never done that for a talk before, so I went back and got it. But I do have a bunch of JHipster stickers up here, if anyone wants one. Any other questions? There's got to be a couple. Over there? My glasses are a little dirty. Yeah?
As the major part of the code is generated, how do you upgrade the frameworks which are bundled and used by
So the question was, since a lot of the code is generated, how do you upgrade? So the nice thing is Yeoman has a feature built in for that. And what happens is there's a couple like Git things you can use where you do rebase and then continue after that. You can go back to the last time you upgraded. What I typically do though is it's got those files in there that you use to generate it, so you can regenerate it. Basically, you can regenerate the project, you can regenerate your entities if you want to, but you don't have to. And then you just go through there and do the diffs, right? And say, okay, this is new code or this is my code. Another thing that I've started doing is creating new classes for functionality instead of like overriding existing classes, because then it's a little easier to upgrade. Good question. Anyone else? Well, hit me up on Twitter if you have more questions. We got one over there. Way over there, yeah. You just need Java and then whatever build tool. And if Gradle has a wrapper, so you don't even need that. And there's a Maven wrapper too, so just Java basically. And then NPM and all that, you'll need Yo, right? Yeoman, so you need to install Yeoman and I think Grunt from the command line or Gulp, and then NPM and Node. Nope, Spring Boot comes with Tomcat embedded, so he asked if Tomcat was installed. It comes with Tomcat or Undertow or Jetty embedded, so you don't need to actually install a container. And actually, one of the things they added in Spring Boot 1.3, you might have seen it, they have this dev tools that I didn't have to actually start and stop anything. So it does live reloading, kind of like J-Rebel, and allows you to compile classes and reload those in the JVM. And it also has the ability on a Unix system to actually have it as executable. So you don't even need to do java-jar. You can just fire it as an executable. So someone discovered that Java reads like jars from, I think, top to bottom, and so you can put a script at the beginning of that jar, and it'll actually execute it. So kind of cool. Anyone else? Well, I think you're free to go. That's the last talk of the day, right? Thank you. Come get some stickers. And some scotch if you want some.